I got it.
All right, I guess this is the review of Pink Floyd's Animals, the 1977 album by the rock group Pink Floyd.
Yeah, it's a rock album. Get that right, Graham. Let's make sure you get that
album.
right. Now, why isn't this labeled progressive rock? What does progressive rock mean? That's something I was asking myself as I was listening to this, because Pink Floyd is often described as a prog rock band.
I mean, I agree, but I think like Apple doesn't have like the into each genre. If that
No,
makes
but I'm
sense.
asking you, I'm asking you, what does progressive rock mean to you? Would you say this is a progressive rock album?
I would say it's a progressive rock album. I guess maybe more albums that are more like sort of experimental in the way they handle music. Like,
Sure.
I mean, if you listen to music of the time, there's not like a 15-minute, radio song.
Would you would you call this a concept album?
I would call it a concept album. I mean, it revolves around a main theme. So yeah, so I think prog rock is very tied in with concept albums. Even so, like, Sgt. Pepper's and I can't really think of any other ones.
Well, I thought of Tommy's the Who while I was listening to this, because there's actually a line, you're deaf, dumb, and blind. Yep. Just keep on pretending. All right, so you want to cut this thing up track by track, right? That's your idea.
Yeah, so I guess we'll start with Pigs on a Wing, part 1.
Yeah, are you going to have questions for me? Do you want me to ask you questions? How are we going through this?
I don't really have any order. I guess many observations of Pigs. I mean, I guess maybe a summary would work best.
Yeah, I mean,
Pigs on the Wing is the first, bookend of the album, and it's sort of a more like gloomy. If you didn't care, it happened.
Ooh, okay. Let's hear a few. Can you play a few seconds of it? Because I think it's interesting how this album opens and closes. All right, you better stop it. You better stop it before they get you.
It's only 14 seconds. Don't worry, Patrick.
I just think it's really, it's notable, or it's interesting the way this album begins and ends with that, very twangy sort of single acoustic guitar. Because, as we'll discover, by the time we get into the heart of this album, right, deep into the middle of this album, we are so heavily loaded with like synth and sound effects and organ, right, guitar, all these layers.
Yeah.
But it opens and closes so simply.
More of like, yeah, I guess there's no drums, there's no really processing of it. It's just like a single person singing a song.
And this is very Roger Waters too, because it is like the chord structure is very simple, and it's either in C or G. I mean, I think these are just C, G, and D chords, which, as I've gotten more into music myself, like going back and looking at Pink Floyd, you can kind of tell sometimes Roger Waters compositions, because they tend to be, hovering around like C, G, sort of, I don't want to say like the simpler keys, but like they kind of are. So you'll see, interestingly enough, by the time they get to like Comfortably Numb, you'll see that song be sort of half like a bunch of G's and C's and half then over in this weird A range. But, G, C, D, A minor, F, like very comfortable, right at home, very simple wheelhouse for this song, which I think makes sense. How do you sort of react to this album when you start it up, when this song starts playing? What's your kind of feeling?
I mean, I guess like it's a very just like calm album. Like you wouldn't expect it. Like I think sort of the big transition of the album is, I guess, Pigs on the Wing to Dogs, which is this very like like guitar heavy kind of drums, the whole whatever. It's like, I think, I don't really know how to put it into words, but it's like, I don't know, it just feels hopeful in like the lyrics or the guitar itself, but the lyrics are sort of more like darker, which is sort of like calling to Pigs on the Wing Part 2. That's the more, it still has the same guitar, but then that's the more hopeful lyrics.
I like that. Like, there's a way musically that happens for me too. This line, occasionally glancing up through the rain. And that is like very optimistic for me. I don't know exactly why, but
yeah, I think like the last 3 lines, like occasionally glancing up through the rain, wondering which of the buggers to blame.
Yeah, so
I guess
let's
you would
go.
say
So
that.
let's go through this. So we got, if you didn't care what happened to me and I didn't care for you, we would zigzag our way through the boredom and pain, occasionally glancing up through the rain, wondering which of the buggers to blame, and watching for pigs on a wing. Now, what is your reaction to pigs? Like, what does pigs on the wing represent for you? So because we've got animals in every song. So like, what's the
I mean,
symbology here?
I guess I've never really thought about it before, but I definitely think like, I guess maybe thinking of it through like looking in like inside, if that makes sense. Like
Okay.
if you're glancing up is at the world of, the middle three tracks, which are, dogs, sheep, pigs, whatever. Like I guess maybe that's how I think about it. It's more of a look into it,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think of pigs on the wing as, so like when pigs fly is this expression, right? Like, people say stuff like, well, when pigs fly, that'll happen. So there's some, and this is where my knowledge of Roger Waters and sort of his hangups and like the political knots that he's still working to untie inside of himself, like today, right? I think of this idea that there's this idea of oppression here, right? Like if we didn't have each other, right? Hypothetically, if we were lone individual agents, we would be wandering lost. It would be raining. That's this idea of oppressiveness, right? And we would be just blaming people. We'd be wondering who's to blame for our lot, which is interesting because there's this idea of displacing responsibility for your own life too. It's not like wondering what we did wrong, right? It's like wondering who's to blame. And then this idea of maybe watching for something hopeful, right? Like
Actually, wait, can I say
change to come.
something of like adding on to that I've just sort of thought
Yeah.
of? So like when you say like calling to the wall, that's like goodbye blue sky.
Mm-hmm.
So is blue sky like good, I guess, in this occasion? So it's like, are we looking up through the brain to find the blue sky, like the good, if we're being oppressed in this sort of like on the ground?
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
looking for something. Yeah, looking for something up above to like get us out of this sort of oppressive state. And this is where I think a little bit too about, this was written in 1970. This album came out in what, 77?
77.
So we're like the the counter revolution or the revolution, however you want to view it, like sort of the hippie revolution has failed, right? Like we're in, and some might argue progressive rock and sort of like the sort of rock and roll experiment is like transmorphing, failing, like, right? We're leaving that true classic rock phase, or we already have, and we're heading into something else. So there's something there. I also feel like I heard once, I don't know if this is true, but I feel like I read or heard once that Roger Waters wrote this song for his wife. So there's also this idea. There's also this idea there, right? Of like the world sucks. We can't control anything, but like if we have each other, thank God we have each other, because if we didn't, we would be lost in sort of this jungle out there. It's interesting that this song too feels like it could end right. It feels like it ends at home, right? I think it is in the key of G. I'm not 100% sure. It might be in the key of C. So it either ends on like the tonic or the dominant, but it ends in this very nice and sort of resolved place. And then you have at the beginning of Dogs this fade in, right? So as we talked about a little bit earlier too, I often think of this as like we're settling in for stories, for some like animal fables, right?
Yeah.
So this is like the sort of troubadour with the guitar, just like, let's get ready for these stories. And then we have this slow fade in on the next track,
like
into
almost
sort of the meat of things.
If you want to think about it, like if you are telling the narrator's telling the story to somebody, like is this like sort of like a one-on-one kind of guitar kind of thing, if that makes sense, like a campfire?
Yeah, it's like that jerk that all the other guys hate at like freshman year of college, who's just like sitting under a tree, like being a raconteur, like, hey, everyone gathered around, look at me, I'm Roger Waters.
Yeah, and also I find it, I'm sort of looking at like the lyrics too, like I find it really interesting that zigzag is used.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like zigzag doesn't mean lost, like it's a very controlled pattern.
Yeah, but like not, but also like not optimal, right? So like if you're zigzagging, you're like, well, so it's interesting now that you say that, zigzag our way through the boredom and pain. So like an idea that like you're trying to like avoid or get around, do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the boredom and pain.
But it's almost like become like sort of a sequence where you've done this before.
Yeah. Zigzag is also cool just because it's obviously got built-in rhyme and alliteration. So it's just a great phrase anytime you can use it.
But I mean, I think Pigs on the Wing is a great start to an album. It's sort of like, it's not a very abrasive and hard opening to an album.
Nope. No, I mean, the only abrasive thing there now, the word buggers is a little more scandalous in, Britain than it is here. I mean, it's a little bit like saying, F-worders.
Yeah.
But I think other than that, yeah, this is a pretty light introduction. And one thing that I definitely was thinking about throughout listening to this is the way in which, the album before this is Wish You Were Here. And as we've talked about before, that album is also 5 tracks, but it is like, in my mind, it's sort of the opposite structure of this. It has these 2 very prog rock tracks and Shine On You Crazy Diamond bookending it. And then it has these 3, a little bit more sort of like rock, pop rock, folk rock. I mean, Wish You Were Here is like a folk rock song kind of right in the middle of that. And it's interesting to me that Pigs on the Wing almost feels like it could be a continuation thematically and musically from the title track of Wish You Were Here. So that's something interesting too. Mother would be the track on their next album, The Wall, that I think most clearly sort of echoes this too. So
like sort of, I don't know, the idea of like stories within stories, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And of
like,
course, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I mean like Wish You Were Here has the bookend track, Shine On You Crazy Diamond. But that's like, I guess there's like little stories within it. So
Yeah.
like animals and sort of with The Wall too, where it's like you have the school years and then like Hollywood, and then I guess when he sort of loses it in Hollywood.
Yeah, yeah. So there's an
like,
incident that happens between, so like on the In the Flesh tour, which of course then becomes a track on The Wall, which is the tour they do, I believe, after Animals, big tour. And of course the Pigs on the Wing become these big floating pigs that are part of their show. Roger Waters actually spits on like a fan.
Oh yeah, and that's sort of like he wanted to like build a wall.
Right, because he realized he was so disgusted with himself and the fan and that whole setup that like that's what things had come to. Because they of course started like doing these very intimate gigs at like clubs and whatnot, around I believe Liverpool. Not 100% sure there though, but so things have gotten very big and a little bit maybe out of hand. So yeah, good opening track, fun one to play on guitar too.
We'll go into Dogs.
Yeah,
play a few seconds of that. All right, I guess that's what we'll play.
So you get that twangy guitar coming back in, right? But now we're building on top of it, and like the slow fade in, I really like because it sets us up for like, okay, this is gonna be we got to settle in for this. We got to settle in for story time here.
Yeah, that's also what I noticed about a lot of like on The Wall. There's a lot of like abrupt transitions,
mm-hmm.
and maybe on Dark Side of the Moon more like smooth.
Yeah, Dark Side of the Moon to me feels like there's some that are hard, right? Like the opening to Money is like hard, but clearly there are tracks, especially at the beginning and then at the end, that are kind of designed to flow in and out of each other. Now, this song is where also like in terms of chords and stuff that are being used, things get like a little bit more complex. We've got like a D minor 9, we've got a B flat, we've got like a weird suspended A, and then we've got all sorts of guitar solos coming in throughout here. It's like this song is an opus in and of itself. I don't know, what's your feel on this song? What's its significance, position on the album here?
I love Dogs, one of my favorite songs of all time, I guess I would say. Like it's a great song, and I think I like definitely how it just sort of fades in, like even this idea of like being a story in it of itself. So it's like, how you have like, actually I didn't touch on this earlier. I think like if Pigs on the Wing, going to the hero's journey, mm-hmm. if that's like your, like this fade into Dogs is, I guess, like entering into the special world.
Yeah, crossing the threshold, sure. Yeah.
Which is,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know exactly.
I like, and you're talking about, and when you talk about here, like a story within and of itself, this is a life story, right? I mean, if we just look at the first 3 stanzas here, right, as the lyrics are written, like this idea of like a full adult life, right? Very clearly starting as an adult life, I think. Originally, my understanding is this song was supposed to be about sort of like a businessman Like, and you can see that written in here, but someone who
Yeah, you
basically
gotta
has
be
to like
crazy.
compete and fight, right? To get ahead. And I like how the song gets more intense and more intense, and there are more layers and more layers like the deeper we get. So it's not, everything doesn't feel super comfortable at the beginning, right? Like the organs like are sounding melancholy and dark a little bit. But we also don't hear the dog sound effects. I was thinking about this too. We don't really hear the sound effects of the dogs until the middle of this song, which is interesting because there are also pig sound effects and sheep sound effects, right, on the next two songs, but they're a little more upfront. So we also have, and I think you mentioned this when we were talking before, that this happens in another song. We also do this switch from from second person to first person to second person, I think, in here, right? Don't we get some eyes later on? I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I gotta admit that I'm a little confused.
Yeah, right, which is sort of like the second half of the song. Could you play at 340, like 340 to 4 or something? Because this is where the album kicks in for me at about 345.
I think where the album kicks in for me is like the cancer part. Just another sad old man all alone and dying of cancer, and then it sort of trails on.
And yeah. Yeah, so play this. Yeah.
What time do you say it was?
Like 340 would be fine because it kicks in at like 344.
The lyrics and actually.
Sad old man, all alone, dying of cancer.
Yeah, we get a little synth in here, and then like 340. Yeah, right there. When that guitar kicks in, like we're in the heat of it.
Oh, for sure.
And then there's also a huge transition on the Bad Blood slows and turns to Stone, and then we get this whole, is it Dragged Down by the Stone? But in the middle,
like down by the Stone, and then Stone repeats.
Around it, about the 8-minute mark, and the repetition there, the echo of Stone switches the pulse of the song in a really cool way. It, like the way Stone echoes, like switches up our rhythm in a way that I thought was really neat on this listen.
Also, here's something I sort of just realized today. The Stone is like a motif, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That is exactly why I felt like, we're listening. This is a story being told by dogs, because there's this idea. So I don't feel alone on the way to the Stone. Right now that I've bound somewhere safe to bear my bone on the final Pigs on the Wind track, and then we have the Stone here. This sounds like, I'm like, oh, this is a dog singing this song, which is probably how Roger Waters would have sort of seen himself at the time, I would guess.
Because it's like sort of maybe make the John Lennon argument. Or he said, he wrote Imagine and then was sort of under fire, which I don't think he should have been.
Because of its communist or socialist sensibilities, is that why?
But it's like, I guess he grew up like the rest of you in the sort of like middle class, like English society.
Also, Imagine is so just like it's almost like saccharine, like fake sugary positive. Like, sure, maybe like those like ideals might lead someone to be interested in communism or socialism, but the idea that song is some sort of like indoctrination or something, I think it's almost stupidly superficial, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, it's like, okay, get rid of all your possessions, do whatever.
This song, and this is like, if you were in a concert listening to this album, like if you were listening to Animals all the way through, and at least Roger Waters has toured and done for half of the show Animals all the way through. When you hit that 8-minute mark and you go into that that middle 4 to 6 minute kind of fantasia of like synths and whatever, like you're in the thick of it. That's like the come up, as it were. And what's interesting is that's also the one part of the album that I think is maybe expendable. Like I was kind of thinking, as sacrilegious as this is, while I was listening this time, I was kind of thinking to myself, like, okay, are there any parts of this you could cut? Are there any parts I would move? And I think dogs and sheep have to be tracks 2 and 4, but I think they could be flipped. I think Pigs needs to be in the middle, 3 different ones, and it certainly makes sense as the 3rd track. But I'll say more when we ultimately get to Sheep about what I think the sort of narrative progression of this song is. Because like this to me is a song about someone who is doing what they need to get ahead and looking out for themselves in the world, and it leads to loneliness, discontentment, sort of a sad negative outlook on the world, right? You believe at heart everyone's a killer. And then at the very end, I love this repetition, who was born in a house full of pain, who was trained not to spit in the fan. Like this is lyrically awesome to me. How do you feel about how this song ends?
You.
Yeah.
I don't have, I don't know what to say. All right, never mind.
What?
No. I don't have as many thoughts as you on this album, but then again, I am not I don't have a master's in English. I mean,
but
it's like,
and you're like, look, you're into this album before I got into this album. So I liked it, especially I like the Pigs on the Wing tracks. But I actually remember, it's funny now that you say that, when I was a sophomore in high school, I want to say, I was in this play with like 5 other people, a small cast, and one of them was really into Pink Floyd, and we were chatting about this album at one point, and I was like, yeah, I like Pigs on the Wing and I like Sheep, but I can't really get into Dogs. And he was like, dude, Dogs is the best track on the album. And I remember in college was the first time. So like in college, we had this thing called R-Tunes where you could just share U-Tunes with everyone on the network. And I remember getting all of the Pink Floyd albums, all the Led Zeppelin albums, right? It's when I really got into classic rock. And I remember getting super into this album, and I would listen to it at night while I fell asleep. And I remember realizing, okay, Dogs is probably my favorite. The guitar is so sick. And then this is the most, so like, you know, as you mentioned earlier, right? What was the original title of this? It was just the first lyric, right?
It's You Gotta Be Crazy.
Yeah. So this and Sheep were originally not intended as straight animal, right, parables, allegories. That was a concept added later on. I think this song holds up the best in terms of like being thematically relevant outside of this.
I think it could hold its own as a single.
Yeah. So
I mean, even I guess this song would actually fit quite well in Wish You Were Here, if you have sort of this idea of have a cigar, sort of like businessman music industry.
Absolutely.
Like I think if you added, change the production up a little bit, but I think the lyrics still stand.
That's interesting to think about, that the fact that were this and Sheep holdovers from the Wish You Were Here sessions, or were they later sessions? Because it's interesting to think about taking those 3, like basically combining these 2 albums in a way, if that makes sense, right? The idea that you can take, it definitely feels of that time. And this also feels like the time when, well, I guess you could argue that Dark Side of the Moon is the most balanced. There's a lot more, the piano balance is a lot more there, the keyboard balance is a lot more there in Dark Side of the Moon. But I think somewhere in this Wish You Were Here Animals era is when the Roger Waters led, era of the band is peaking, right? That some people might say it's Wish You Were Here. I think it's somewhere in this area. But that's interesting to think of, like, Dogs and Sheep as being 2 songs that kind of pull back towards Wish You Were Here. And then Pigs on the Wing, maybe, and maybe even Pigs, 3 different ones, as songs that kind of pull forward perhaps towards The Wall. But The Wall, see, even if we look at Wish You Were Here, though, like you're bringing up with Welcome to the Machine and Have a Cigar, like The Wall is still dealing with those same themes. It's like, it's very clear the themes that Roger Waters has and needs to deal with, right? That at some level, what he needs to talk about is the experience he's going through within the music industry, right? And he's got this political thing because of his dad tied into that too, right?
And then I think bringing up this like business character, if that makes sense, business character, and Comfortably Numb, if you watch the movie, or The Wall, Comfortably Numb, if you watch the movie, like the sort of person who's like trying to put on the show is this like manager or whatever. Who's like, he doesn't really care who he is. Right. He just wants to make
money. Shoot him up with something, get him out there so he can perform, right? And be the trained monkey we need him to be. I mean, and now as soon as you said that, I'd never really thought about the significance of puppets, right, in The Wall. But like, there's this idea that people maybe, right, are sort of puppets. Even someone super famous who you would think would have a lot of control artistically over stuff. Like, you would imagine that, like, I mean, maybe they weren't getting along together internally, but like as a band, after Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here, I imagine Pink Floyd could kind of do like whatever they wanted to do, right? Like,
yeah, sort of like Kanye West, or I don't
yes.
know, any other artist. Yeah.
I think Animals was the first album that wasn't filmed at, or sorry, that wasn't recorded at Abbey Road Studios as well, or at
It
least
was
since, like, their
recorded
first
at Britannia Row,
yeah.
I believe.
So they were kind of breaking away and finding their independence there in that way as well. So one question I want to ask. So like you mentioned the stone here is this recurring motif. So we have dragged down by the stone, and the stone is made by bad blood, slows and turns to stone. So what do you think is going on there with the stone? What is the stone?
Wait, let me read the lyrics again. Sorry.
Yep.
Wait, where's the? I'm sorry.
So in what's the third? Wait. So okay, as you have it here, it's in the fourth stanza down, and as the fear grows, the bad blood slows and turns to stone. Right, and then we have a good drown as you go down, all alone, dragged down by the stone, and then at the end of the song, the last line again is dragged down by the stone.
I mean, also tying this in, I guess another layer, I guess, is stone is what they measure weight in England, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. You used to lose the weight they used to need to throw around.
Yes, yeah.
Stone, weight, whatever.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's like, I guess.
Double entendre for sure.
I
think there's something there about a heart, something about this, like, so bad blood, right? So like the more afraid you get, the more you like lock into and worry about like these grudges, these vendettas, right? Whatever issues you have with other people, and this idea, I think, of your heart kind of turning to stone.
Maybe the idea of, I guess, if you're so scared, like you sort of started to isolate yourself, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If that makes sense, like, bring to the wall. I don't know, like I keep cross-referencing albums, but it's like, I mean, I'm sure they know what they're doing.
It all interrelates, man. It all
ties into each other.
And the drag down by the stone is the end of the first half of the song, right? And then it's the end of the second half of the song. So I think that idea of stone is very significant, and we'll see it.
But you were just being dragged down by the people that you hate, I guess, if that makes sense.
Well, not necessarily by the people you hate, by the hatred that has hardened in your heart because of your fear of other people, right? There's just why I like the nuance of this song. This song is very much like, okay, yeah, you've done what you needed to do to get ahead in life, but the tragedy of that is you then become the thing that brings yourself down. You've turned into something ferocious. You've turned into this dog, right? And the idea of a dog, right, as being both this paradox that a dog is both domesticated and kind of has this wolfish nature, right? So this idea that you could turn at any point. And then also, as we'll see in the last track on this album, dogs are also animals that the people in control use to control sheep, right? So
and tying into Animal Farm, dogs are like this sort of like very close to the pigs, and this sort of militant force.
And even more so, they're bred that way, right? So Jesse, like the dog that has the puppies, is very much a sort of good character and one of the most loyal characters to the original owner of the farm. But this way that the dogs that exist at Animal Farm in the book go from being sort of loyal and helpful to being brainwashed, right? And manipulated.
Like the dogs, I guess, are like the hand of the pigs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
So let's take that into the next song, because I'm going to argue that the next song is sort of about the people that control capitalistic systems. So Dogs here is a little bit about how, like, this is how the people in charge get you to play the game. And what does it do? It like crushes your heart, right? And you end up dragging yourself down. All right. So what are your first thoughts on this guy?
On Pigs, 3 different ones. I mean, I think it's it's a great track, and I never realized this until I listened to it today. I never realized like there's 3 different verses separated by a chorus that are 3 different ones. I never actually got that meaning.
Yeah, do you think we need the subtitle here?
You bring that up. I like the "Hey You White House" because that's a reference to like a person in like English culture. Which
I just wonder if the 3 different ones is interesting. I wonder if they felt like they needed that because they had pigs on the wing. If they wanted to draw attention to what I think is already a clear 1, 2, 3 structure. And let's talk, if we're thinking about like sort of structures within structures, right? We have this 5-part song structure with 2 bookends, 3 central songs. And now our middle song, right, has this 3-part, or if you want to argue a 5-part, if you want to count the 2 interludes, right? It has this 3 or 5 part structure right in the middle, which is just beautiful, I think.
And then if you look at it, like the first part, I guess if you want to tie it into like sin, is like if you read the lyrics, it's more of like this sort of gluttonous kind of character, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yep.
It's like, pig stand your fat chin.
Yep.
When you're down the pig mine. So it's like you're sort of like this big kind of like gluttonous sort of more character where, your second pig is like this sort of like just hard kind of like, I don't know what to say about that, commanding.
There's not even
like
a gun, right? Like a feel of steel. Like this is a person who is like, so that, yeah, if that first verse, which I think you've done well with, is about someone who is just sort of gluttony, someone who is greed or gluttony, right? So someone just going, and that reminds me, let's bring the Beatles up again, the White Album, Piggies, right? Seems very connected with that first, if you know that song, the first stanza here. The second one is, I love bus stop rat bag. There are so many great little turns of phrase here. And then in the last shade, house proud town mouse. Some of these are so simple and yet so on point. What do you make of this? You're nearly a laugh, but you're really a cry. Because that comes back at the end of 1 and 2, and then in a modified way at the end of 3. What does that mean to you?
Like, I mean, I guess maybe irony, if that makes sense.
Okay, how so?
Like, I mean, I think like, oh shoot, I have to think for a second.
Okay.
Let me just.
Yeah, so when you say irony, you're saying there's like two layers there, and I think I agree. It's like there's something about the like I would laugh if I weren't crying, right? Something like
exactly.
that.
That's sort of what I'm going for.
Okay.
It's like
this is so preposterous that like I wish I could laugh, except actually this is like terrible.
It's like laughing at Donald Trump or something like that.
Yes.
It's like you have to laugh at this man, but he is your president or former president.
And I saw, since you brought that up, when I saw Roger Waters in 2017, summer of 2017, maybe summer of 2018. It was like the last summer the Palace was open or whatever, but I went with my dad, and during the middle of like there were 2 halves of the show, and during kind of the middle of the show, they like inflated and built this like factory warehouse thing kind of on the floor of on the basketball court, like where that would have been. So it was sort of like the city was getting erected, and then they like spotlighted graffiti and all this stuff on it, and these protest posters came up, and there was all this stuff that was just like F Trump and whatever. And then they did this song, and it was very clearly like they're talking about Trump and politics. And there was this guy with a beard sitting on the other side of me from my dad. And when the anti-Trump stuff came up, he just goes, "Oh, hell no, no."
Oh, so he just doesn't get the music. Like Roger Waters is the most like anti-Trump person possible.
Yeah, like if you know Roger Waters, man, you know he's not going to be into Donald Trump, right? It's like whatever your thoughts are, just like, "Oh, hell no, hell no." Like I thought it was pretty funny.
It's sort of funny. I'll bring this up. I'll probably edit this out later. But my dad works for as a security officer, just to do something with his free time.
Okay, yeah.
He works from home and does whatever. My dad's very like ADD and like needs to do things a lot of the time. And he got a job as security. And he will never work a Roger Waters show again because of that.
Because of the politics?
Yes.
Oh wow. Okay.
So like there's a Roger Waters tour this fall. And I asked him if he's gonna do it, and he's like, no, because it's like Roger Waters is very pro-Palestine, and that's a very sort of like new, hot, kind of touchy subject. Yes.
Yeah, that is very that whole thing is a mess.
I don't think there's really a side you should take.
It's
no matter what you believe.
I don't want people to die. It seems like you gave the Jews a country. This is funny. Maybe it'd be funny if you didn't cut this out. It's like a weird. It's like it seems like you told Israel they were a country like almost 100 years ago, and like they probably need to be allowed to like do certain things as a country, but like I don't know, these spots, right?
A long time ago, Palestine was the majority, I believe.
Well, but Palestine was never okay. So Palestine, the name, was a name applied by the Romans to the region when it was called Judea. So like there have always, of course, been, well, not always, of course. So like Jerusalem in that area was,
if that makes sense.
Yes. However, we need to recognize that like Jews lived in Jerusalem like 2,000 years before Islam was even a religion. So like there's a lot of like layers of like history. And and unfortunately, like things got off to a bad start the way they went about giving them the country, because it was like these colonialistic powers, right, just coming in and basically saying like, nope, we're taking this land and making it this kind of country. But Israel will argue that they're open to a two-state solution and that the Arabs are not. I don't know what the solution is.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't.
if I did, they'd give me a Nobel Peace Prize. It's tough though.
Yeah, and then I guess calling back to that, you nearly after you really cry, like you're good fun, but it's like you're sort of this dangerous kind of character. Like you're good fun with a handgun, you're hot stuff with a hat pin.
Yeah, like you're almost over the hump into parody that we could laugh at, right? It's like some like Animal Farm again, like some of this like Animal Farm in a way, like
1 second, Patrick.
Certainly was to me and my friends when we read it for the first time in 5th grade. Is like very funny, right? But then, oh, you left. You're gone. You're gone, you're gone. So I'm gonna sing a song because you're gone, you're gone, you're gone. You're gone, you're gone. So you're gonna sing a song. If you didn't, okay. Since you kind of took a break, I need to get. It's so hot here. I have to get more liquids to refill my mouth.
No, I'm back now, but you can go
I
do
know.
whatever.
I know. I see you. I see you now.
Oh, I didn't realize my camera was on. I sort of forgot about that. I guess I'll be back to get some of the drinks.
Boredom and pain. Occasionally glancing up through the rain. Wondering which of the brothers to blame. And watching pigs on the wing. I know that you care. What happens to me? And you know that I care. For you too. So I don't feel alone. Or the weight of the stone. Now that I've found somewhere safe to bury my bone. And any fool knows a dog needs a home. A shelter. Pigs on the wing. Oh yeah, let's go.
All right, we're back. Yay.
I'm in that DJ mix again.
Oh, all right. I guess we'll start off. So here's a little observation I had when I listened to. So until I read the liner notes, I never realized White House was like a noun, a person. I always thought it was like a White House, like this sort of like decadent kind of thing.
Yeah,
Sort of
she's
just like
Mary Whitehouse, right?
Yeah, Mary
I think-
White House.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of funny because it still kind of stands.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if this was intentional or not, but of course, like with symbolism and stuff like that, it counts, so to speak, even if it's not intentional. But like White House also suggests just the governmental authority of the United States as well, right? So it could be you could hear that and think, oh, just the president, right?
Yeah.
That's what we call synecdoche or metonymy, one of the two. It's one and maybe both, which is when thing related to something is used to reference it. So when you say the White House said today, blah, 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 right? You really mean like the president or the spokesman for the president.
Like Roper said. I mean,
Right.
Or like
Yep.
David Feldman said.
Yep. Bam, bam, bam,
But then I like
bam,
this
that-
lyric, like you're trying to keep our feelings off the street.
Yeah. What are you reading to that?
I mean, I like it because I mean it's kind of a literal line.
Like
like
keep
you-
our feelings, like not letting us protest, not letting us speak out.
Yeah,
Like
or
that
even
kind-
just like sort of like keeping like your distrust or like your I don't know what's the word to use. Sort of like in your situation.
Trying to like hush dissent and
Yes,
disagreement
exactly.
kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
That's how I think about it. I mean, I think you bring up protest, which is another sort of more, I guess, another use of that word. I don't know.
Okay, so how about let's unpack I mean, you know the most famous line or word from this song, perhaps, right? It's repeated.
I do not. What is it again?
Sure. I think the haha charade you are is like
Yeah. Haha, sure you are.
is pretty famous, right? So like what is your interpretation of that word? And then I'll come in with my English teacher thing at the end of it.
I mean, if you use charade, I guess like using the word charade, the definition is like sort of this like kind of like I don't know how to use the word without using the word in itself. This sort of masquerade, like this sort of like
That's a
false
great
front, if that
great
makes sense.
Sure.
Like you're sort of like you put on the you put in the smile for I guess like a lot of politicians. You think about it, it's like you put on this sort of like look and this thing that you're trying to be, but who are you really? Like is like the president ever going to be good? Probably not. Like they've always got some little narrative and plan going on.
Right. Are they ever going to be genuine? Right. Can they ever be genuine? Do you even want a president to be genuine? Do you know what I mean? Like, I remember thinking,
but it's like
yeah.
So it's like, you think of like a nice president, like, I don't know, like JFK, Obama, but it's like, do they like, there's definitely more than
was
like,
JFK that nice? I mean, he was kind of a charade, right? He was hooking up with all sorts of women while he was this paragon of like, married man. So you touch on, I think, the important for the first reading of charade. So, or charade, right, as we would normally say in English, but it is right, French originally, and it's like a kind of riddle, like originally. So like there's this idea, or
like the game of charades, or the game of charades, where you like do little.
Yes. So like a charade or charade is a riddle or something that is bizarre and hard to figure out. So that's like the first level of meaning, right? Then we get from that the game charades, right? Which is you're doing things that are hard to figure out. Like, so a charade can be one round of the game of charades. Then because of the game of charades, we get this tertiary meaning, right? This third meaning in English of basically a false front. This is what you're talking about, right? Like this idea, like a deception, a pretense, a phoniness, right? And so it's interesting to consider, we're calling these leaders charades, right? So on the one hand, we're calling them out for their phoniness, right? And the fact that they're two-faced, right? They're duplicitous. But at the same time, like there's also this idea that like, if I could figure this out, right? Like if I could figure these leaders out, if I could figure out these bizarre little riddles that are these leaders and figure out their agenda, maybe I could have some agency or some control. So it's like there's something about their duplicity that makes it very hard to know, right, exactly what to think or what to challenge. I think when about like Animal Farm again, right, and the idea of like Napoleon and how he uses squealer to like change the commandments, right? And there's all this like misinformation and sort of rewriting of history that happens regularly to kind of keep everyone
thinking
confused.
About that way differently based on how you said that.
Okay.
I was thinking more of like this sort of like idea of like Napoleon sort of like kind of like Napoleon didn't understand what Snowball was doing. So it was like, is that the reason he wanted him out? Because he was sort of against his own plan.
I think he saw Snowball as a threat. I think he saw Snowball as a threat. And Snowball had the better ideas, right? Like Napoleon wanted to lead, but Snowball was the one with the plans.
I made this connection in my mind. I'm not sure how to put it into words. But that's all right. Like this sort of idea of like, I guess if Snowball is a puzzle to Napoleon, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, and so it's like he can't figure him out, he's got to get rid of him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where it's like he has these ideas of like the future and whatever, where he definitely like sort of puts it off, but then comes back to it, like the windmill and the I don't know, other little dealios.
Right, because Napoleon's against the windmill until he kicks Snowball out, and then he says the windmill was his idea the whole time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that part of the book where Napoleon just pees on the windmill plans. It's like one of my favorite parts of the whole book. That's a good part. I recently reread the book. Just like such disrespect. So you got to stem the evil tide and keep it all on the inside. Marry your Nelia treat, but you're really a cry. So this is where, so if we think of someone who's listening to this album as an album experience, right? And they're like, and if we think of this whole album as a little bit of a charade or a puzzle, right? It's at this part of the album where at least the contemporary British audience, right, would know, there are some direct one-to-one political correlations here, which I think is
like
important.
Animal Farm almost.
Yes. Although, yes. I think all of Animal Farm holds up as like a general allegory. Like, I don't think Animal Farm has to be interpreted as being about, say, the Russian Revolution. I think it holds up just as like a general commentary, a fairy tale on power.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think here, the fact that White House can be read as just about the United States, if you want to. Also, isn't White House a kind of pig? Let me look that up.
When you say that, I've never really thought of White House as like president. I mean, I've thought about it, but I feel like more, I just feel like sort of like this like prominent member in a community. Like if you're in like a rural English setting.
Yeah, I think
Like-
I think the fact that the White House is such a thing.
Yeah.
Is there a White House type of
And then
thing?
I like these lyrics. I don't know if you can see if I highlight it, but you got to stem the evil tide and keep it all on the inside. That sort of, goes back to the charade line.
Yeah, and there's
Where
an
it's like
idea.
you sort of have these own internal, like, plans, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting here is there's maybe, maybe credit is being given like the evil tide. Whose evil tide is that, right? So there's an idea here that maybe White House, even though White House is being called out for being a charade, like a phony, is trying to do something good, right? This idea that like, there's bad stuff going on, you're trying to stem it, but you're trying to also keep it all inside, right? You're not letting us actually process this openly, right? You're trying to control everything. You're trying to manipulate everything. And then this idea of treat to cry is, I think interesting at the very end.
Oh, what were you gonna touch on?
I think that was it. Oh, let's look up the word treat. I'm gonna look up the word treat.
I can look it up as well, I guess.
So treat as a noun, an entertainment, outing, food or drink or other indulgement for the enjoyment of others. So like you're almost like a fun spectacle to watch, an unexpected gift, an event, a snack food item designed to be given to pets. Right? So there's this idea that like you're almost something that could be gobbled up by the system. There's like it's interesting, the sort of layers of that. So all right, let's go to the sheep.
All right, sheep.
Now, was this originally called ranting and raving, babbling and
It
bleating?
was raving and drooling.
Raving and drooling. Which is interesting because raving and drooling could describe sheep or it could describe dogs.
Yeah.
So let's hear a little sheep.
I don't know. We're like the sort of main guitar. Oh, here's the sheep. I like that little.
Again, this pastoral beginning again, right? It's starting in nice and slow, like dogs. Some nice Richard Wright on the keys there. All right.
All right, maybe let's skip to the more guitar part.
I love my favorite part of this song is that outro twangy guitar riff, which brings us back to the idea of pigs on the wing.
It should go in a few seconds here. I really like the guitar work in the song. When it hits, I'll sort of explain my thoughts, maybe. Oh, there we go. Like this, like it feels like very like forward moving, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, it's build. I think I told you
even,
that.
Like,
go ahead.
Sorry, like I definitely agree with that aspect. It's like sort of building up to this, but even the guitar itself, it feels like it's moving forward. Like if you just took the main section,
it's driving.
It's sort of like momentum of.
Yes. Now Can you look up? Picture that on iTunes or whatever on music. Picture that by Roger Waters or YouTube, whatever.
Oh,
either one will work.
I've told me to listen to this. I never did.
Now jump in maybe like 30 seconds.
Away your last cigarette. Picture your finger.
It's got that same driving sort of guitar pulse underneath. Now go like maybe halfway through the song.
Yeah, I don't really know music structure, but like what is?
Click about halfway through. Play about halfway through. Click about halfway through. Can you play about halfway through?
Right.
Pick up ahead. Picture the tree at the side of the road. Picture my hands growing steadily colder.
slowly out of obscurity into a dream. Right? Like it's the same. It's the same as the middle part of Sheep.
Is
in
it
terms
the
of the
same?
pacing and the drive, it's just very similar, like structurally
Yeah.
and like and the beat. Harmlessly passing your time in the grassland away. All right, so what's your take on this?
I mean, you're sort of like, you know, you lived your life in, I guess going back to dogs, you're living your life sort of like, you know, doing whatever, working at your job. You know, you're never really gonna go to this place that you strive to go like the dogs. But the dogs have explained that it's not that great. Does that make sense?
Yes, a little bit. I think
Oh
there's
yeah,
some,
okay. Here's the line right here. I've looked over Jordan and I've seen things are not what they seem.
yeah.
There's sort of your tieback line.
Well, and what is that line? I looked over Jordan and what did I see? That's a thing. Hang on.
It's a song. I don't remember what the rest of it.
It's like an army coming towards me. I think it's the something army. It's the let's see.
I mean, it's from the Bible, I believe.
Well, I don't know if it's from the Bible or if it's just from Swing. So it's in Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, right? I looked over Jordan and what I see coming for to carry me home, a band of angels coming over me, coming for to carry me home. So it's like looking into the sort of like the future, right? And seeing like maybe death coming, coming for to carry me home, a band of angels coming home for me, coming for to carry me home. Which is kind of a song about death. Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, right? And then we then get this, the Lord is my shepherd bit in the middle, which is an interpolation and sort of a send up of this is a psalm, right?
Yeah, I think so. And then I guess the second verse sort of ties in with only dimly aware of certain unease in the air. What do you get for pretending the danger is not real? Like I guess you're passing, like you're unaware of the bigger scheme, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like you don't know what's gonna come and get you.
So the first stanza is like, okay, you're just kind of milling about, you're doing whatever, even though you kind of have this vague feeling, right, that things aren't quite right? It's like, things are a little bit, it's like the beginning of like, I don't know, Macbeth or something. It's like, the weather's not quite right, things don't feel good. I got kind of bad vibes about where we're going, right? And then we get this, you better watch out, right? So each one of these first two stanzas have like a first half and a second half. So you're passing your time in the grassland, dimly aware that something's a little uneasy. Watch out. There might be dogs around, right? Like, oh, shoot, like we could be in trouble. I've looked over Jordan, what have I seen? Things are not what they seem. So like, we're living in a fantasy world and maybe this is like a weird, and there's also a sort of death illusion there. And then here's this next question, okay? So like this interrogative, like, what do you get? And I think here, this is Roger Waters or this is the band talking to the audience, right? I think that part of what's going on here is trying to, whether it's intentional or it's just sort of subconscious, there's like an idea here of actualizing people to sort of struggle against the powers that be. So it's like, what are you guys getting from just like, doing drugs and dancing at this Pink Floyd concert, right? Like you're meek and obedient. You just do what they told you, right? Right. This next line, you follow the leader down well-trodden corridors into the valley of steel. So this idea that people have been led before and sacrificed before. And this valley of steel, it feels like a slaughterhouse, right? Like this idea that like you're going down these corridors basically to your death. What a surprise. A look of terminal shock in your eyes, right? Terminal means we're at the end of the story, but also like you're about to die. Like this is a death shock as you get killed, right? Now things are really what they seem. No, this is no bad dream. So to me, these first two stanzas are like the sheep in the fields and then the reality that happens when those sheep get taken into slaughter. They've been oblivious. They felt like maybe something wasn't quite right. And then they don't realize it until the very end.
And then it's like sort of denial at the end.
Yes,
the last one.
kind of obliviousness. And then we get in the middle here, this part that, this is crazy. Can you play some of this on, because you can click to like the lyrics on that iTunes? Because I honestly had never processed these as lyrics, like until today. Really, yeah. The first line, I can kind of hear that they're kind of saying something, but I assumed it was just like distorted background.
I think when I first played this song, I was watching the lyrics play.
Oh, okay.
Oh, shit. So I think that's sort of what, no, I was like, huh, this sounds familiar. It's like, oh, I looked it up. I was like, it's, the Bible verse, but sort of changed.
And
And
so
also-
Valley of Steel was mentioned, and this is a riff on Psalm 23, which mentions the Valley of Death. So like this is really thematically nice what's going on in this song here.
And then, you know, we sort of skip over this really nice instrumental that sort of changes from the forward moving guitar to, I guess maybe if I can get a little bit here. Sort of ominous.
Yes, yeah. And you can hear that driving, it's that bass. It's that bass that's driving things. Very similar to the bass on One of These Days from Metal as well, that kind of like has that propulsion to it. As well as yeah, so and if we look at these, so Psalm 23 is the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me into the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Which, when we get in the song, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down. He makes me down to lie through pastures green. He leadeth me the silent waters by. With bright knives he releaseth my soul. He maketh me to hang on hooks in high places. He coveteth me to lamb cutlets, right, et cetera, et cetera. And then it gets silly. Master the art of karate. Lo, we shall rise.
Yeah, I
up.
know that's a funny one.
And then we get buggers, back, right? Which is interesting because that's in the Pigs on the Wing. But this idea of flipping this metaphor. So like the psalm, the metaphor is the Lord is your shepherd, but it's like he's preparing the sheep for, like, it's a mixed metaphor, but the Lord is laying a table, is preparing a feast for you. And in this version, it's like, no, the powers that be have tricked you. You are the feast, right? That's like the dark flip at the end. It's like, you are the thing that is being served up. You think you're being led to some promised land, but you are just lambs to the literal slaughter, right? And then we get a final two. So this, again, has this 5-part structure, right? Bleeding and babbling, I fell on his neck with a scream, wave upon wave of demented avengers, marched cheerfully out of obscurity into the dream. So, is this the eye from Pigs on the Wing? Is this a dog that killed the master? Or is this a sheep that has been actualized and has killed a dog? What's your thought on that?
Well, first of all, this part is like sort of what ties it into Animal Farm for me personally.
Okay.
Like this is sort of the revolution in the story, if that makes sense.
Ooh, I would argue this would be a revolution at the end of Animal Farm if everyone rose up against Napoleon. But okay.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I don't tie it into Jones, I just tied it into Revolution, which is sort of a theme in Animal Farm.
And this idea at the end in the last verse too, have you heard the news? The dogs are dead. You better stay at home and do as you're told. Get out of the road if you want to grow old. So is this the new so someone has revolted, right? Whether this is the original singer from the Pigs on the Wing bookends, which I think is clearly the same narrative voice, right? In those two songs, talking to the same other person or other character, whatever it might be. This is interesting, this idea that like, if you don't want to die in this revolution, you better stay home and close your doors. But is it the sheep who have risen up? Or is this the dogs who have risen up? I think there's an idea here of like sheep turning into dogs, which is why I thought it might be interesting if you flipped, right? Like this and dogs somehow. There's an idea that maybe the responsibility of the dogs, the way to like, for the dogs to unburden their soul from that stone, right, is to lead some sort of revolution. You know what I mean? Like there's some maybe kind of atonement going on here.
And this is sort of my thoughts. I don't know. This is sort of different than yours. I think this sort of is, you've gotten rid of the dogs, which is this buffer between the sheep and the state, the pigs.
Okay.
So maybe if you draw a comparison to, Animal Farm in Stalinist Russia, it's like what's in a capitalist society. It's like, we sort of look up to the dogs.
Yeah. The secret
And-
police. I mean, they could be considered. You could even consider them cops.
But
if you
then
wanted
you've
to,
sort of
so-
gotten rid of business, but then now you're sort of, I guess, at the mercy of the pigs.
Yeah, you've destroyed the structure. So like if you're going to revolt, then things are going to be dangerous for all because you're going to tear down the structure, right? Like as soon as you attack and kill the shepherd, well, there's no one to protect you in those pastures anymore, right? You're not going to
Yes.
you're not going to get murdered as food at the end of your life, but you might get killed and eaten by some other animal tomorrow, right? I mean, it's a dog eat dog world, as they say, right? Can you play a little bit of the outro? This, because I think the guitar outro on this is so beautiful. It's like so melodic. After we've come through a lot of chaos. No, you had it.
Is
You
there a
had
part
it.
here?
You had it. No, it was like before.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Go back. Go back. Go back. It reminds me a little bit of shades of "Run Like Hell" in this song too.
Yeah.
Like with the guitar and the way it's going, which is interesting.
It just sort of reminds me of this, like, maybe like a more optimistic and uptone, maybe like more classic rock song at the time.
Yeah. Now here's an interesting comparison. Do you know the song "War Pigs"?
I did not. By who?
So look up "War Pigs" by Black Sabbath. Well, do it on can you do it on the music so we can go to the lyrics?
I can probably get it on YouTube. The problem is Apple. It's a pain to get to
Okay.
places.
All right. So hang on. I'll tell you what. So you can play the beginning of it, then I'll tell you what part to go to.
I can probably find the lyrics. Oh, there, lyrics right there.
Well, we don't necessarily need the lyrics. They were just tell me cue the part I want you to go to. So I want you to go to. And you can hear what the beginning of the song sounds like, and then it kicks in. Okay, pause it for 1 second. And I'll tell you where to go. Okay, so. Like go to like 620. So this song, also using an animal metaphor to talk about politics, it has this super melodic outro that kicks in at the very end of the song here, which is reminiscent a little bit of what happens on Sheep. So yeah, play this and. So you get the gist, but it's this super melodic bit that comes in after like a pretty hard driving, like heavy rock song.
Yeah. When was the song released?
I don't know. That's a good question. I do not know. I would guess 80s, but I'm not sure.
Released 1970. Wait.
1970?
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is before.
Yeah. A little more on point in the Vietnam War and stuff there, right? Obviously.
Yeah.
Have you seen the little piggies in their starched white shirts? All right, are we ready to go? Get out of the road if you want to grow old. Are we ready to go to the last track here?
Oh yeah. Pigs on the Wing, the hopeful end of Animals.
Now, I'm curious. Pull up that iTunes again. I want you to play the very beginning of the first Pigs on the Wing and the very beginning of this Pigs on the Wing. I want to see if they're like identical. You know what I mean?
I believe they are.
Okay, got it. Now let's try the next one. Ooh, a little different. A little more reverb or something.
A little more bassy. I don't know.
Yeah.
You'd-
I love this. This is so I love the lyrics of this. I don't know. What's your take? Are you ready? Are you ready for the does this album feel like the right length? So like when you listen through the whole album and you got to Pigs on the Wing Part 2, did this feel like the conclusion you wanted?
It did feel like the conclusion I wanted. Like when I listened to it today, I sort of like just took a few minutes to like, that was a really good album. Like I love Pigs on the Wing Part 2. It's like just a nice, like hopeful ending of this like sort of very like dark story.
Yeah.
Like there's no I guess in the story of Animals, there's no like hopefulness in the main 3 tracks.
Yeah,
Except for maybe like the dogs are dead, but then you've got into this other dimension of you better stay home.
Yeah, and there's some, it's not happy, but there's some real like power to revolution in Pigs. Like Pigs is a very like, Dogs is to some degree like depressing, right? Whereas Pigs is like a little bit bitter, cynical, challenging back. I love how like that this is basically, and unfortunately, I don't think Roger Waters was sort of able to live the truth of this, but there's something about this where it's like, this is the solution, that the solution to a world full of like the messed up sociopolitical manipulations, backstabbing, all that is to find someone, right? Is to find someone you can trust. It's like as crazy as the world is, it's like, all right, you know that I care about you and I know that you care for me, right? So now I don't feel alone, right? And like everybody knows a dog needs a home, so you can just stay out of all the craziness of the world, which I don't know. I really like the way this idea, a shelter from Pigs on the Wing. So like it was unclear whether we were looking for Pigs on a Wing in that first song is like when pigs fly, like the crazy thing, or is that going to be something that might save us, right? And the idea here is that like, no, it's just cycles of revolution, right? It's like new pigs might fly in and take control from the old pigs, but like we just want to shelter.
And then calling back to what you said about how maybe it's written by somebody who's become a dog. There's your line right there. Any fool who knows needs
a dog needs a home. And there's also there's a nice, so I don't feel alone, or the weight of the stone, right? And the weight of the stone, as we developed in that earlier song Dogs, is the hardened sort of rock of emotion, right? That you develop when you deal with the cynical, exploitative world, right? So I think that's pretty interesting. And then it's like, wait. Or I guess to bury the bone. To bury my bone is it's like a sexual double entendre, which is kind of funny. Like in the final song of an album that is mostly about politics. Sorry to pollute your mind with that, but it's like this idea that like, okay, I've got a safe spot. I think this was written for his wife. I'm going to look that up right now. And then, of course, we have this other idea. So you mentioned this earlier, that this song reminds you a little bit of Outside of the Wall, that track. And I know that The Wall was constructed conscientiously to sort of loop back around, right? So the music that's playing on Outside the Wall, right, is music that matches up with the music that's playing at the very beginning of In the Flesh. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if you let things cycle around. So this has the same effect, right? In that this would loop back around into the first Pigs on the Wing. And on the and on the 8-track version, they have that solo. Although, like I've never actually listened to any 8-track like period. But it's weird because on the sort of MP3 versions of that, they put the solo in the middle, and it would seem like the solo would need to come at the end of part 2. So it would be between part 2 and part 1. Right? Because if you put it at the end of part 1, it's just before Dogs. It doesn't really make sense.
I find it kind of funny, tying into another thing, like on so Pink Floyd albums they made for vinyl, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But like there's a lot of transitions that they make that go from disc to disc.
What do you mean? They go from disc to, like, explain that.
Oh, side to side. So like on Dark Side of the Moon, they transitioned from Great Gig in the Sky, which is like you want to have that momentum, then go into Money.
Mm-hmm.
Like Great Gig in the Sky is the end of the side, if that makes sense.
Oh, so you flip it for Money. Yeah.
Yes.
Which is okay. So that makes sense then why Money has that hard intro, right? Like it's a hard stop after Great Gig in the Sky.
I'm trying to think of On the Wall what that transition would be.
Well, there's 3 of those 4 of those transitions, right? So
it goes from Mother to Goodbye Blue Sky.
Goodbye Blue Sky is the first on, and then it should go from Comfortably Numb to, right? Is Comfortably Numb the end of side 3?
And then it goes into The Show Must Go On.
Right. Yeah, which makes sense.
The Wall,
because the Wall, structurally the Wall is fascinating because
it,
right, like Go ahead.
No, like, because I have it here on physical release,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes a lot more sense if you think of it in a 4 structure.
Yes. Yeah, very much so, because suddenly you get like the reveals of these, I was talking about parallel structures with you on the iMessage or whatever, and
Yes.
there's this way in which like there is a first half to second half parallel structure thing going on, but there also is an even bigger like all 4 sides. So like Mother matching up with Comfortably Numb like makes a lot of sense, right? The show, it's interesting that The Show Must Go On, like I wonder if they could have snuck The Show Must Go On into the end of like right after Comfortably Numb, because then you would be starting side 1 and side 4 with In the Flesh, right? I don't know, there's a lot of really cool things to look
I don't know, The Show Must Go On, I forget about that one a lot. Like it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't add much to the album for me personally. Like, I think they could have definitely just gone from Comfortably Numb to In the Flesh.
It's a transition. So In the Flesh, the first version of In the Flesh has that little bit of intro to it, right? Which I think, like what is it? Like a flute or something? It's whatever's playing on Outside the Wall too. So, and the In the Flesh without... In the Flesh, the second one should be In the Flesh ! Instead of, because the first one has a question mark. Just like, In the Flesh! Dude, Waiting for the Worms, that's been my favorite Pink Floyd track recently.
I like that
and then,
one a lot.
that's so interesting, because then that matches up with the Happiest Days of Our Lives. Wow. So if you just pick a number, right, on the wall, like you pick the number 4, Happiest Days of Our Lives, One of My Turns, Vera, Waiting for the Worms, 4 of my top probably 7 tracks on the album, I would say.
Because like a lot of songs on the wall have like parallel structure to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you even just look at the time signatures. So look at Nobody Home and Young Lust, right? Both like right at 325 on the third tracks there. That's interesting.
And I talked to Vaughn about this when I went over to his house the other day. Like we played like Empty Spaces, like it goes from Build the Wall, and then it goes into this sort of abrupt transition into Young Lust.
Mm-hmm.
Which I quite like.
Can we do?
Young Lust is one of my. It's a very good Pink Floyd track.
You like Young Lust? That was a hit. That was like a radio hit.
It was.
Yeah. Well, it was a single at least.
I thought like the big ones were "Hey You" and "Comfortably Numb."
Well,
and Happiest Days of Our Lives Part 2.
Yeah, Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd. Comfortably Numb. Hey You. But Young Lust gets radio play. And Mother's kind of big. Yeah, Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 is interesting. Like that disco beat that's behind it was Bob Ezrin's idea, like the producer, because he's like, look, we need a single, like give me something that we can put on the radio, right? Because they hadn't had a single since Wish You Were Here, probably, right? If that got released as a single. So Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 was sort of cooked up with that beat specifically, right, to have play as a single.
Then Part 3, that's the best Happiest Days of Our Lives. Another Brick in the Wall, sorry.
So let's see, so according to this, they released Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, One of My Turns, Run Like Hell, Don't Leave Me Now. Oh, it's weird. I hear Young Lust on the radio all the time. Comfortably Numb.
Really?
Hey You. Don't Leave Me Now and Comfortably Numb were, I guess, released together. Run Like Hell makes sense. That's kind of a jam.
Like
Hey You. Yeah. Do you know the song The Dogs of War? That's from Momentary Lapse of Reason. It's interesting because it's another Animal.
I've not listened to Momentary Lapse of Reason yet. Is that a good one? Is that?
I like Division Bell and Momentary Lapse of Reason. So you should listen to them. So what I would do, have you listened to the final cut yet?
No.
So we go Animals, right? Then we go The Wall. Then we go the final cut, which is like, if The Wall is almost The Wall is like a Roger Waters solo album, but he's getting everyone to do everything he wants them to do for the album, kind of.
Yes.
The final cut is like a Roger Waters solo album, but like he didn't get that much help. So like the Fletcher Memorial Home has like a sick David Gilmour solo on it. Have you seen The Wall, the movie?
Oh yeah, I've seen that one.
So you'll recognize when the Tigers broke free, which is on the final cut. It's very the Tigers broke free.
I didn't know that.
It's
I know what song you're talking about. I didn't realize it was put on.
So the final cut is almost like tracks that it's like the Wall, a third album for the Wall, kind of in a way. Like the album cover is like a close up on his dad's like war like decorations or whatever.
Oh, it is. I never.
Yeah,
like, I know the cover. I don't know why I'm looking it up here. For the sake of the thing, I should probably look up here. I'll probably cut out this little wall bit at the end, but. Do you want to just wrap up animals for a second so I can quit recording?
Sure. Yeah. What?
Right.
What do you want me to say, Yao?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's a good ending to like. When I finished this album today, I just like sort of sat back and was like, "That was a good album. I liked that."
It's good. It's it gets deep. It gets real. It has. It encapsulates that middle period, right? Pink Floyd sound. So if we have the early period, which is like the Syd Barrett and the transition out of Syd Barrett, right? And then for me, I think of the middle period as being very much like it's Dark Side of the Moon through the Wall / the final cut, right? And then you have the post Roger Waters period. So I think that this is a great example of middle period Pink Floyd. I think you've got some great exploration of soundscapes, but also some really catchy like riffs, some great David Gilmour guitar, some excellent vocals, probably like peak vocals in terms of the lyrics. For me, I love all Pink Floyd, and I love The Wall, and that will probably always hold like the dearest place in my heart. But there's something about the universal applicability of these lyrics and the way they tap into the use of the second person, right? This album is about me as the listener. This album is addressed to me as the listener. The previous album, right, Wish You Were Here, is directed, seems very clearly to Syd Barrett and like it's the band talking about the band. This is an album talking to me as a citizen of the world. The next album is very much Roger Waters' story. So this is in like this nice kind of sweet spot. I think.
Yeah, but I thought about that earlier. Like, The Wall is an I album.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wish You Were Here is a sort of
we album.
Us.
Yeah.
I guess sort of looking at other things.
Well, because it's like the Welcome to the Machine and Have a Cigar is about their experience, right? As a band, like getting courted in this system. And then Wish You Were Here is them, talking to their friend.
Dark Side of the Moon kind of fits a weird spot. It's sort of like,
Dark Side of the Moon.
It's like you can think about it yourself, if that makes sense.
And it's like this thematic, and it's these generalized thematic pressures. So it's like if Animals is specifically about socio-political crap that's going on in the world right now, and maybe has always been going on, Dark Side of the Moon is more generally about just sort of like these stresses and anxieties and challenges, right, of modern life. So if you compared like Time to Dogs, that would be a very interesting comparison, I think. This idea of
I sort of thought about too, adding to that. 2 tracks on Piper at the Gates of Dawn are you tracks. If I can pull it up somewhere here. Yes, like Lucifer Sam and Matilda Mother are like you, like a person track, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think so. I wonder too, I have this question too, because if you look at like Obscured by Clouds or More, or these songs that are when they were doing like album soundtracks and like movie soundtracks and things like that after the first couple albums, right? Because you have what's the first one, Piper at the Gates of Dawn or Saucer Full of Secrets? Piper at the Gates of Dawn, right? So you have Piper at the Gates of Dawn, which is like basically like acid rock, right? Like Syd Barrett like driven album. Then you have Saucer Full of Secrets, which is like a sister album, right, to Piper at the Gates of Dawn. And then you go into this very experimental phase where they're trying all sorts of things. Atom Heart Mother, you got to listen to that album too. That's like the inverse of metal in a way, because the whole first half of the album is this like big orchestral like track. I think they did it once or twice live, but it's got like choirs and horns and all this stuff. And then the second half is like very experimental individual tracks. And it's like they figured something out with Dark Side of the Moon. And I think they peaked there with their sampling as well. So like the the sampling of sound effects and of voices and of things like that is maybe honed and perfected there. And then they move away from that, you know, in the next couple, I don't know, fascinating. I hope we can do another Pink Floyd album at some point.
Yeah.
And I'd like to do a Kanye album too. I think maybe Life of Pablo might be the one, since iTunes is saying that is like the first essential album. And since that's an album I haven't really gone back to, like, to critically consider since like the first 6 months it was out, that might be a hot choice.
All right, I might cut the recording. So I guess
Yeah.
any final. I think Animals.
No, listen to Pink Floyd, everyone. Yeah, listen. I would listen to this album. I would listen to Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, The Wall in that order for people who don't know the band that well. I think that
that's correct.
But I
And
also
then go
think
like early and then later. I think is that the right order?
yes, and I wouldn't jump around on this one. Like you can get into. I mean, even The Wall, you could cherry pick some songs and really enjoy them. I think that this is a album that's really served by listening to it straight through. So
Yeah.
there's my take.